Can't you just feel it? The conflict is becoming apparent in our culture. It reminds me of those words of John Paul II. We're now living in the final confrontation between the gospel and the anti-gospel, between the church and the anti-church, between Christ and the antichrist. And if we don't choose to know God's word, to believe God's word, and follow God's word, we're going to be a sitting duck for all kinds of confusion, all kinds of disorder. Those are really important choices that people have to make.
And these choices are difficult. Who am I going to marry? What kind of life am I going to live? How am I going to raise my kids? What am I going to do with my time, my talent, and my treasure? And I have to make a choice today. Jesus says to each one of us, I came that you might have life and have it to the full. The question is, do we want it? Welcome, friends, to another week of The Choices We Face. I'm Peter Herbeck, and I'm really excited to introduce to you our special guest today, J.P. DeGance. J.P. is the president and founder of Communio, and he's the author of this really interesting and important book called Endgame, the church's strategic move to save faith and family in America. Welcome, JP.
Hey, Peter, thanks so much for having me.
No, it's a delight. It's a delight. So there's so much here that you can communicate to us, but before we get into the meat of Communio and what it's all about, tell us a little bit about your background, your story, your journey of faith.
Well, I grew up in a great family with parents who loved our Lord and motivated me on the life issues, so came to Washington to try to save the world by focusing on politics. And God, through a variety of providential steps, redirected me, recognizing that it was a great learning, career learning experience, but there's something much more significant that was affecting the health of our country, the health of our world, and that was the family. And 15 years ago, my sister's family failed. She was in an abusive marriage, and my wife and I ended up being blessed to be able to take in her 4 kids. And we saw firsthand what happens when families fail in such a tragic way. And God started to use that in my own life to really redirect my heart. And as I started to look at what was going on in the public policy process and in the country, it became increasingly clear that the family was the key for everything going on in our country. An old friend told me, who was in the oil industry from Texas. He said, trying to change the world by focusing on politics is a lot like trying to change the weather by playing with a thermometer. And I thought there's a lot of truth in that. Yeah.
So you mentioned, GP, the public policy stuff going on in Washington and its impact on family. What kind of things do you have in mind when you say that?
Well, there's the family is impacted by both so many visible and invisible areas of public policy, both intentional and unintentional. Everything from the obvious stuff about life and abortion and marriage to things that are less obvious, like transportation, land use, things that affect the economic well-being of a family, right? Anything that makes it more expensive for a couple to raise children, live in a home, all of that impacts the family, right? And but when you start to look at the data around even just looking at economic issues, right? Folks thrive, right? Overall, the growth in income, right, is almost over the last 40 years exclusively within married-headed households, right? There's men who get married end up having much higher earnings than men who don't, and even with the same educational levels, right? So I started seeing some of this stuff and realizing there's a lot that can and should be done to bolster and strengthen the family. And I started in looking at the church, right? The number of people getting married is plummeting, right? The number of Catholic weddings since 1970 is down about 77% now. Since 1970, wow, right?
That's stunning.
It's huge. When we talk about praying for vocations, and we should, we need to understand that marriage is probably the one that we need to pray about the most. Priestly ordinations are only down 38% over the same time frame, right? So if we think about it, we're getting probably twice as many priestly vocations as you would expect, because priests only come from a married Catholic family typically. right? So that I started to see that that's and recognize that your average Catholic parish isn't doing much there. 82% of Catholic parishes reported on our study with the Barna Group that they spent 0% annually on marriage and relationship ministry. So there's a great, arbitrage or an opportunity that we can jump in and affect change.
It's surprising that it's such a blind spot in so many places because the family is the foundation of so much.
Right.
And it's ground zero of the spiritual battle that
That's
we're
right.
facing in this country and in the West in particular. So,
Yeah, you're 100% right? So it's oftentimes we think the collapse of faith led to the collapse of the family. And it's not that that doesn't happen, but societally speaking, right, over the last 60 years, it's not arguable. The marriage and the family has collapsed and preceded the collapse of faith, right? Yeah. 80% of everybody sitting in the pews on Sunday grew up in an intact married family, regardless of age, right? So a 25-year-old and a 60-year-old, 4 out of 5 grew up with continuously married parents. And now anybody watching this would know that somebody who was born 60 years ago was way more likely to have had continuously married parents than somebody born 25 years ago, right? Yeah. It's now a minority of all adults under the age of 30 grew up in that kind of family structure.
So you started seeing the political realities and the realities in the church, and then Communio comes about.
Sure.
How did it happen?
Well, I was used to working in, like I said, in public policy, we'd see you try to get to an end goal, like passing a piece of legislation. You work back from that and develop a strategy and a plan to get there. Okay. And then you'd husband resources, right? And deploy them in such a way, because it's a zero-sum outcome. You either get it or you don't, right? You either win or you lose. Yeah. And started to think, well, in ministry is more important, right? The outcomes are eternal. But so why not bring the kind of focus on strategy and best practices into the ministry space, right? And sort of baptize it, sanctify it, bring it into the service of the church. And so what I set out to do, working with some business guys, was figure out a way to quantifiably move family stability on a large scale. We got to work with some great partners at Live the Life Ministries, my friend Richard Albertson, Dennis Stoika, who I just are great friends and allies. And we worked to find out a way to work through the church, leveraging cool technologies with best practices. We were able to work with about 93 churches in Duval County and lower the divorce rate there by 24%. Wow. In 3 years. And we took from that sort of best practices. I wrote about it in the book Endgame, and have begun working with churches around the country to deploy those strategies on what you'd say a unit scale level at the local parish level. Yeah.
What are some of those best practices? Like concretely, describe for us.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things. One, skills-based ministry is really important, right? I will, if I want to become good at golf, I won't get good at golf by watching the Masters, okay? Mm-hmm. And drawing an analogy there, becoming good at marriage, you don't get there by listening to a great homily or hearing a lecture. You have to practice the skills that are known and knowable to live a great marriage. And there's an entire field of marriage and relationship education. So one thing is skills-based ministry should live in the parish. Number two, the hardest thing to do is get any adult to go to a class on anything. And trying to get a married man to do a class to improve in his marital skills is like splitting the atom. So you actually have to take a holistic approach to relationship and marriage ministry, that at the parish level, you have a metanoia, a mindset shift. But this is something that everybody does in the church. Everybody here, we grow. My path to growing in holiness is through my vocation as a married man. Mm-hmm. And so the parish ought to think in terms of how it architects ministry to pour into men and women who are married, right? And to help live that vocation, right? So otherwise, it only goes to a small group of people within the parish that's sort of what I think Matthew Kelly talks about, that 7%. I think that's a great and accurate number. We found that you can go way outside of that when you take a more holistic overall a strategic approach to inviting everybody and making it a front porch ministry.
So
within the
Matthew
church.
7% was referring to what? That small percentage of people that are
Yeah,
bought in, they're sold out, they kind of go to
Yes.
everything, they're on fire or whatever. And you're saying you can, just by virtue of paying attention to the natural order of things and family life and building something that strengthens that, you're able to broaden the circle of engaged people.
Yeah, that's right. Fundamentally, the gospel's advanced through felt need ministry, frequently from the time of Jesus, in healing the sick and feeding the hungry. In our own time in sub-Saharan Africa, we're frequently doing these kinds of corporal works of mercy. In first world America, you don't have distended stomachs and lack of clean water, but what we have is worse. Mother Teresa said in 2004 that loneliness is the epidemic. Loneliness is the I think epidemic of the West, or a curse of the West, she said, and that's what we see in so many of our communities, in so many of our parishes. So when a parish first, instead of starting with the program, which is what we as good Catholics frequently will do, we'll start with a catechetical approach.
Yeah.
We'll start with a program. We want people to come to our class.
Yeah.
They're not ready for that. Okay, it's recognizing that and inviting people in first to something fun and engaging where you still feed them something substantive, right? We say that 90% fun, 10% enrichment. Okay, so it might be a couple's movie night, Screen on the Green. My brother's parish is running that, has run that recently, or a family block party. And then you have some skills ministry that's part of that. And then you draw them into something next, right? So we call that ongoing engagement. Now it's 70-30, now more substance, right? But they're still having fun. They're receiving and being fed by Christ-giving community, Communio, that's where our name comes from, okay? And they practice some light skills of communications or shared expectation, meeting each other's expectations. And then the third level, right, is draw them into that small group, the growth ministry, the growth journey, we call it, that 8 hours or longer skills-based ministry that helps them learn the skills of being married well. It's also for singles, helping singles learn to enter into good Christian friendships. Fundamentally, that's what marriage is. It's becoming good and deep friends with one another, right? And those who are unmarried need to learn how to do that as well, right? In their own single life, right? And so that kind of approach we're seeing churches get a tremendous number of people. We had a Church of the Ascension out in Kansas City, one of our partners, a great parish, had more than 150 participate in 8-hour or longer course over 6 weeks, right? And that's not something you usually get, those kinds of numbers, through a more normative approach.
Right. The fact that you're doing something for singles is really important too, because it's amazing how difficult it is for young people today to even know how to date and how to court somebody and how to ask somebody out. And many of them are lonely and they don't have a place to gather, and being able to gather in the church and build a community there.
Amen.
Let me ask you related to that, you said your brother's doing this, what is it, Entertainment on the Green or Movie on the Green?
Screen on the Green.
Screen on the Green, okay.
Yeah.
Screen on the Green. Then you said, so either watching a movie of some kind or some kind of a...
Right.
But then you said they do some skill enrichment that night. Give us a practical example of that.
Right. So we've got on our churches that work with us get access to our ministry toolbox, which has a bunch of different enrichment exercises and activities that they're downloadable and they can deploy. So you don't have to have a degree in family life or marriage ministry. So it might be 3 things I love about you is an appreciation activity that a couple would do, right? Yeah. And so might be distributed. So couples would check in. Okay, there might be a check-in. You get beverage tickets or food tickets, okay? And then when you do, you receive a card with some questions that you go over. And the questions are really a skill activity.
Right, and you help them talk to each other.
Correct.
It's not so hard. You get a little help and it's, wow, that was great. You know?
Yes, yeah. Frequently what we want to do, I think what we have to resist, the temptation as Catholics, is we want to put experts in front of them and provide a lecture, which has some value, but we have to recognize that I'm not going to become effective as a husband through a lecture.
Right.
Okay, I have to sort of there's certain known and knowable skills. Talk about it in Endgame. There's 5 interpersonal, 5 intrapersonal skill areas that the field of marriage and relationship education has uncovered. I think, as St. Augustine said, all truth is God's truth.
Yeah.
So it seems that in many ways, science is uncovering elements that are inherently part of how God's wired us, right?
Yeah.
And those are things that our parishes should be schools of love. We should help form people so that they can live all the old, the Christian song, they'll know we are Christians by our love, right?
Yeah.
And our parishes ought to be a place where single people and married people can learn the skills to love well.
It's great that you're applying your own skill set to this whole area to say, well, we can't just keep doing the same thing, bringing people, as you're saying, into a classroom. First of all, there's only a small number of people who do that or are attracted to it. And then among them, only a few have a capacity to pivot and start applying it in their lives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you accumulate information, but it doesn't change the habits. And the practical doesn't move you into the space where you're practically beginning to implement it in your life.
That's right. That's right. We get better at anything by actually doing the thing we're trying to get better at, right? And this is what we know from the spiritual life, right? If we want to grow in holiness, right? We can't just read books on holiness. We can't just hear great homilies on holiness. We have to actually apply those ideas to our own life, right? And at the parish level, our parishes should be helping us, right? My vocation is as a married man. Feed me in my vocation. Help me become better at being a married man. That's my path that God has ordered for my life to grow in holiness. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the Jacksonville experience you guys did working with different churches, and the divorce rate dropped by 24%.
Yes.
Describe what happened, how that whole thing developed, and who you were working with, and how you gathered the data.
Yeah, so we got started, and we approached it like we would approach a grassroots lobbying campaign in my old life. And we set out to say, where did we want to get to, thinking with the end in mind, working back from there. Did what was called a gap analysis, which is from the public policy world. You'd look and see, okay, who's doing what to try to get this legislation through? You'd think, okay, what are the gaps there? And so we thought about the marriage issue locally from that perspective. We knew there were great content creators, okay, but what was missing was making that content catalytic, getting it into the folks who needed it. We realized, so we partnered with the local organization, Live the Life Ministries, who was the retail boots on the ground working with churches. Our ministry ran marketing and outreach for them. We provided funding to bring all the content that would be necessary into those churches. And over the course of 3 years, through doing sort of a marketing and outreach approach around those 93 churches, just shy of 60,000 people consumed 4 hours or more skills ministry through those churches, which is was a huge number. Prior, we looked at what was happening before we came. There were only about 300 completed units of skills content in the county the year before we came. So there was just a huge step increase by taking this sort of data-informed approach through outreach and marketing to the local parish, to the local church, and with phenomenal content and programs being deployed through those churches.
Yeah, I noticed in just reading about it myself and just seeing that it was not only to help sort of evangelize and renew people who were in the church already, but you guys marketed in such a way that people from the street could come in, people from no religious background, different religious backgrounds brought together. Describe the kind of an evening that you would invite them to that had that sort of content to it.
This is so critical, right? We talk about inside out, right? So this is a ministry for those in your pews and those outside of it, right? Those in the pews need help, okay? This is a big thing folks sometimes miss. In our recently published study, 18% of all married churchgoers are struggling right now in their marriage, right? But when you pull that apart, it's a bit worse than that. Mm-hmm. There's a big gap between women and men, okay? A married woman is 62% more likely to report struggling than her husband, okay? Which I know maybe doesn't surprise a lot of the women listeners here, but us guys were a little bit slower on the uptake on that, right? So providing help to those there is critical, but doing so in a way that can attract a guy to it, okay? And so it has to have its approach can't have a feminine posture. You have to do something that attracts guys to it. And then that's how we think in terms of outside of the church as well.
And you have to have food or something.
Yeah, food, right? And so we think about the outside of the churches. 40 of those in the churches on any given Sunday is 60-40, 65-35 men to women, or women to men in terms of the advantage. So when we think in terms of outreach and fun ways to draw people in, okay, do so in a way that attracts men, because the women will also come. So we think in terms of, for instance, cornhole tournament. Okay, some level of competition gets the guys there. We had a church do a craft and draft night, which was craft soda, craft beer, and the NFL draft, and then all this is then drawn to. There's always some substance there. This is not just to have fun, although people will come for the fun. And then we'll stay to be fed. And I mean that obviously not both literally and spiritually, right? And so constructing it that way, right? And then developing at the parish level a hospitality team, a real team that knows how to welcome people, right? It's so many times in our parish life, our parishes function as sacramental service stations, right? Where the parish life is limited to the 2 minutes before Mass starts and about 60 seconds after Mass ends. Folks race in and race out. And so the idea is, how do we build parish life so that there can be real accompaniment? What the Holy Father talks about is the need for accompaniment. Well, how can we accompany somebody who we have to chase down after Mass to talk to? So it's building a culture within the parish where real communio can exist.
And it's a way in which many different kinds of people can participate in the evangelistic mission of the church. Now, there's only so many Ralph Martins and so many guys like you who are out there doing stuff full time and all that. Most people say, I'd love to help with evangelization. I just don't know how to do it. I don't know what to do. But you're able to come together as a parish community and saying, we're going to provide this environment. We're going to serve. We're going to wash people's feet. We're going to love people. And then you find out people have gifts of hospitality. People like to cook. People like to do this, that, and everybody's participating in creating an environment that's really life-giving for people. That's right. Yeah.
And we're helping people at the parish level. We're creating a system, helping the parish create the system that allows people to even better live, I think, their baptismal vocation, right? To advance and share the gospel, right? And so in our process, when we work with a parish, we call it the data-informed full circle relationship ministry. One part of that is to train on hospitality and the first steps of pre-evangelization and evangelization, right? So that folks at the parish, so folks are there for the first time. It doesn't help if we can help get 350 people there and 200 of them are there for the first time. If they don't connect with somebody, if they don't meet with somebody, and they don't build those first steps of trust with them. And so we know that's a critically important ingredient in supporting that the parish today and really knowing how to do that.
Yeah. So let's say there's a pastor happened to be watching the program tonight, or maybe somebody who works on a parish staff. They go, wow, we need that. I want to call that guy. And then if they call you, what are the first steps and what happens? How do they get engaged?
So when they reach out to us, we'll pair them up with one of our church engagement directors, some fabulous guys, Jared Smythe, who worked at Focus for 15 years, Damon Owens, who has been a leader in the marriage space, is on our team working with parishes to have the onboarding conversations, orient them to our methodology. It's a holistic approach. It's not a program. It looks differently. Describe it this way. We have the form. Okay, the matter looks differently parish to parish. So we've worked in parishes with grinding poverty, migrant farm communities, and we've worked in affluent suburban parishes and really everything in between. Okay, so when we get started with the church, the first step is running a survey. We deploy it either during announcements or during the homily. Helps Father get a quick sense of what's going on. It's deployed electronically. Okay, and then we help them gather data. That's all part of a four-step approach: analyze, plan, implement, review. So that survey helps us to analyze. We unpack the data with Father and his leadership team. We create clear, measurable goals, a written plan to achieve those goals over 3 years. Then we walk with them for 3 years as they implement it. Yeah. Okay, we're not just doing a 2-day, 5-day training where you're going to have a Sherpa walk with you through the Himalayas for the next 3 years, right? Help you
like
go
boots
that
on
journey.
the ground. You actually come to the parish sometimes.
We do come to the parish at the beginning in that first 120-day period to get it upstarted. But then you have somebody who's working with you twice monthly, whatever the cadence that the parish needs, with video calls, with the task force leader. We help you. We have an org chart to help you think through how that team, your volunteer team, your staff team should be architected, job descriptions for all the roles. And then we're gathering data with you along the way, what's working, what's not working, and helping you tweak it, right? I always say, somebody counted that there were 3,000 baptized that day in Acts 2, right?
Yeah.
So the Holy Spirit cares about numbers, right? And so we shouldn't pretend that numbers don't matter.
Yeah.
We're informed by data, we're not driven by data. So we use the information that we can gather to inform the ministry, to improve the ministry. And that's how we really help a parish build out that data-informed full circle relationship ministry model.
Yeah. Do you connect these parishes together then? Or is there like an annual gathering?
Yeah, it's a great
sort
question.
of build community all around the country.
So we're doing that in, for instance, in Kansas City, in the Archdiocese, we're working with 10 parishes. And so every quarter we organize a lunch with pastors and staff leadership. Archbishop Naumann has been phenomenal, and he'll attend periodically. And when we support parishes where there aren't ones nearby, we work to connect them with other parishes so that they can just share best practices. We work ecumenically, right? And one of the great things in Denver, Colorado, we've worked with a number of Catholic parishes and evangelical churches, and getting them together. There's a lot that the Catholic parishes and the evangelical churches have learned from each other in that process.
That's excellent. I mean, this is one area where we can come together.
That's right.
As brothers and sisters in Christ. We're all sharing in this issue. We're experiencing the downfall, the breakup of marriage, the intense spiritual combat
That's right.
that's around the family right now, the deconstruction. It just keeps increasing, the deconstruction of human identity. It's all about the devil's strategy to deconstruct the family, which is the icon of God in the earth, that God himself instituted. And so this really is the place of battle. And it really is, I think, the most important and effective place for evangelization. People are everybody wants to have a healthy marriage and a healthy family. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the original small group.
Yeah, it
There's
really
no doubt
is. So JP, thank you so much for the fantastic work you're doing. And friends, you'll be able to find out more about Communio. The website will be on the screen here. But until next week, I want to offer you this little booklet, What Must I Do to Be Saved by Pete Burak, one of our staff members. We want to offer it to you for free, just for the asking, because it's critical for us to understand the big, big battle on the earth is for eternal souls. This, Communio is about winning people to Christ so they can live with the Lord forever in heaven. And knowing how to get there is really important. God bless you. Hope to see you next week.
Jesus came to save us. All have sinned, and the wages of sin is death. Without his death and resurrection, we would have no hope of eternal life. In the scriptures, Jesus' teaching on the conditions of salvation is consistent, urgent, and pervasive. But we often gloss over these passages or fail to recognize the vitally important truth Jesus is revealing about whether or not we will go to heaven. In my new booklet, What Must I Do to Be Saved?, I unpack several of these important moments in the Gospels to help us understand what Jesus is saying so we can find and stay on the narrow path that leads to eternal life. To get your copy, visit our website or call the number on the screen.